4 years later, before the war, at the final pre-fight press conference at Caesars, the Hearns camp dropped a bombshell by invoking the S word. Leonard's upper body appeared conspicuously more bulked up than it had been for the Lalonde fight the previous autumn, and Tommy for one suggested that he may have had some help. "I've been working on my legs, but you've been working on your body," Hearns told Sugar Ray. "I think you want to be a bodybuilder. The way you pumped up, you look like you've been taking steroids or something." Nervous titters of laughter greeted the hitman's taunting, but when Emanuel Steward repeated the charge, it was no longer a joking matter. "I'm seriously considering asking them to test both boxers for steroids," said Steward. "I've been hearing rumours for some time," a source told me, that Leonard had been using steroids. The steroid question became the burning issue for the day. Reporters flocked to Dr. Elias Ganem, the chairman of the Nevada State Athletic Commission, and to NSAC Executive Director Chuck Minka. "It's not part of our testing procedure, and I see no reason to test for it at this time," said Ganem. But Minka appeared to take it more seriously, allowing that testing might be considered if either camp requested it at the following day's rules meeting. "I haven't especially been working on my body," said Leonard. "I'm 33, and that's what happens when you're 33. Although Leonard laughed off the accusation, Mike Trainer was outraged. What Hearns said and what he did was good theatre. It's actually flattering that Ray looks that good, and I'm just glad Tommy noticed," said the lawyer. "But that's a cheap shot coming from Emanuel Steward. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll put up $100,000 and they can test Ray before the fight, after the fight. And they can take a break after the 6th round and test him then too. We'll see how good his sources are." Trainer added that he wouldn't even ask Hearns to take a test. "Tommy," he said, "doesn't look like he's been taking steroids." When Leonard was asked if he had any objection to the inclusion of steroid testing in the pre-fight exam, he replied, "Not at all." "How do you do it anyway?" he asked. "A urine analysis," somebody guessed. "In that case," said Ray, "I can do it right now." Hearns had engaged James Kinchin, his most recent opponent, to spar with him in Las Vegas. This time, nobody even bothered with trying to put a disguise on J.D. Brown. The espionage was conducted right out on the open. One afternoon, Roger Leonard had walked into the sports pavilion, taken a seat in the audience that assembled there for Hearns' public workout. Ray's brother subsequently delivered a blow-by-blow assessment of the engagement. Incidentally, Leonard twitted Hearns about an incident Roger had seen in the sparring session. "In fact, I'm going to throw the same damn punch." Apparently, Leonard's brother Roger reported that Tommy got hit with a body shot that caused him distress, but they tried to cover it up as a low blow. Kinchin was due in Atlantic City, where he was fighting Stacey McSwain 2 nights earlier, but Stewart offered manager Wes Wombold an extra $2.5 grand if he would stick around for one more sparring session. Kinchin went 3 rounds with Hearns on Wednesday and flew to Atlantic City on the morning of the 8th of June. He stopped Stacey McSwain in 5 rounds that night. After losing to Sugar Ray Leonard, Donnie Lalonde had announced his retirement from the ring on the grounds that he could no longer reconcile causing deliberate pain with the rest of his philosophical outlook. Lalonde had arrived at this epiphany in mid-ring during a New York sparring session with Hector Rosario. There was just a tremendous sense of guilt about hurting another human being, he recalled. And this was a sparring session. The thought stayed with Donnie from that day on. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized it was not a good thing to be in a boxing ring in that frame of mind. Lalonde voiced his opinion that instead of fighting each other, Tommy Hearns and Leonard should join him in retirement. "Personally, I think it's quite unfortunate," said the Canadian, who had earned $5 million for being knocked out by Ray the previous November. "Why are they fighting again? I mean, between them, they must have made well over $100 million. So if it's about money, you're talking about extreme greed. If it's ego, my God, with all these two have accomplished, they don't feel good about themselves by now." Emanuel Steward seemed to admit that Lalonde had a point. "If Tommy was fighting anybody but the senior circuit guys, I'd hate to see him fight again at all," said Steward, who promised he will not let Tommy fight any of the younger fighters, period. There aren't many of the old fellas left anyway, added Steward. Duran, Hagler, I still say he's going to come back, and maybe another rematch with Ray if this is really a great fight. But Tommy can't get himself motivated to fight these younger guys. And the rewards for fighting guys like Barkley or Nunn just don't measure up to the risks involved. What's Tommy got to gain compared to what he's got to lose? He can't get up for these guys, and if he beats a Michael Nunn, people would just say, so what? Hearns was asked whether he might walk away from the sport if he avenged his loss to Leonard. Nah, he replied, I would like to have a rematch with Marvin Hagler, but Barkley doesn't really mean as much to me. Let's remember this was in 1988, and Donnie Lalonde came back to the ring in 1991 and didn't officially retire till 2003 when he lost a points decision to Virgil Hill. Bob Arum optimistically predicted an unprecedented viewing audience of 1 billion, but by Thursday he was beginning to waver. His prediction was predicated on an apparently unspecified number of viewers in China, but 5 days after the tanks rolled into Tiananmen Square, the state-controlled television station in the nation did not seem to be running many Leonard and Hearn promos. You can't trust those Orientals, said Arum, they'll do anything to upstage you. Most of his audience groaned. Arum's Japanese-American wife, Sybil, rolled her eyes in embarrassment. Bob said he's a promoter and it's his business to hype fights. But this is worth considering. When they met in Manila, Muhammad Ali was 9 months older than Ray Leonard will be Monday night. Joe Frazier was a year older than Tommy Hearns and had lost 2 of his last 3. But on the 1st of October 1975, I saw the greatest fight I have ever seen in my life. By '89, Arum was virtually at war with the NBC network, and with Dr. Ferdy Pacheco in particular. The network was backing away from its commitment to boxing, and the fight doctor who had approval on the matches NBC did buy had been shunning top-ranked fights. After Arum charged that Pacheco knew next to nothing about boxing, the fight doctor responded by describing the Leonard-Hearns matchup as a battle of 2 sinking battleships. Although the 15,000 capacity stadium guaranteed that the audience would only be 60% of that for the 1981 Leonard-Hearns fight, tickets were the hottest commodity in the country. 6 days before the fight, authorities in Detroit arrested a man they described as a very high-level drug dealer and found him to be in possession of a pair of $800 ringside tickets. Noting that our office is obligated by law to preserve the value of the property seized during the pendency of the action and recognizing that the ducats would be worthless after Monday night, Wayne County prosecuting attorney Marshall Goldberg contacted Arum for advice on how to proceed. Send them back, Arum told him. I'll sell them again. Hearns shook out the sports pavilion on Saturday, and despite shadowboxing 6 rounds in 100-degree heat, appeared to be bone dry. When you're not sweating like that, it means you have not been taking liquids, noted Evander Holyfield. That usually means you have a weight problem. It seemed unlikely that Hearns would have difficulty making 168, but every ounce over 164 would reduce his purse. A month earlier, Eddie Futch had broken his leg in an automobile accident. His top assistant, Freddie Roach, had taken charge of the Futch stable while Eddie recuperated. The 77-year-old trainer was at Caesars for Hearns' final shakeout and reflected on Monday night's fight. Hearns just had too many tough fights lately, with Roldan, Barkley and Kinchin, and his legs are gone, showing wear and tear from these fights. His chin, which was never great, figures to get him in trouble. But Hearns can still punch, said Futch. He'll be dangerous for 3 or 4 rounds. Leonard cannot afford to get hit like he did against Lalonde, but he should win around the 8th or 9th. Although no one accused him of being a spy, another of Leonard's Washington neighbors, John Thompson, a Georgetown basketball coach, he dropped in to watch Hearns' final workout. UNLV coach Jerry Tarkanian was also conspicuous by his presence during the week that led up to the fight. Tart the Shark had a minority interest in a couple of Las Vegas boxers. Kenyan welterweight Robert Wangila, and American bantamweight Kennedy McKinney. There would be 4 men in each corner on the night of the war. Steward, Prentice Bird, and Walter Smith had all been there for the first Leonard Hearns fight. The only new face was of Ralph Citro, the cutman, who had replaced Don Thibodeau. In Leonard's revamped corner, Ollie Dunlap remained from the first fight, and Ollie was the first to admit, "I don't even understand boxing, I just yell a lot, and in between rounds I hand up the bucket." Pepe Correa, who was the chief second, said of being reuniting with Leonard, "I've been in and I've been out. I'm kind of like the Billy Martin of this camp." Billy Martin is a baseball manager who had been hired and fired 5 times by the New York Yankees. He died in a car crash later that year, Martin. Dave Jacobs, of course, he had been wearing a Kronk jacket when Leonard and Hearns fought in 1981. Those 3 would be joined by cutman Eddie Aliano. Aliano and Citro had worked over 100 world title fights. "But," said Citro, "way back when Eddie fought, I was his cutman. He was such a lousy fighter, I had to teach him how to be a cutman too." Aliano didn't argue with that, but he pointed out that this was not the first time he and Citro had eyed each other from opposing corners. "I stopped Hearns with Barkley," said Eddie. That having been duly noted, the Hearns Brain Trust appeared to have considerable edge in the big fight experience. Pepe Correa had worked a few title fights with the IBF welterweight champion Simon Brown, but this would be his first exposure to the international limelight. Aram, visions of a full-fledged senior tour dancing in his head, ensured the presence of Hagler and Duran at the Leonard Hearns fight by hiring them to work on the English and Spanish closed-circuit telecasts. Duran was unabashedly rooting for Leonard in the hope of a rubber match. A rematch with Hearns, on the other hand, did not seem to appeal to Duran. "Leonard had to win so he can fight me. It's 1-1 with me and Sugar," Duran said through his interpreter. "So I think Leonard owes me a fight. I want to fight Leonard and nobody else." Asked why he was still boxing at his advanced age, Duran cheerfully replied, "For the money." Hagler, who would man a microphone alongside Tim Ryan and Gil Clancy, did not arrive until Sunday, the day before the fight. Although he was on the promoter's payroll, Hagler didn't sound much like a man trying to sell Leonard versus Hearns to the public. "War?" Hagler snarled. The war was between me and Tommy. This is not a war. This is a chess and checkers game. You know? These guys have been watching me for a long time. When I fought Duran, Hearns was watching. Then once I exposed Hearns, he started getting banged around by everybody else. That's the only reason Leonard is taking the fight now." Although he said he found it difficult to pick a winner, Hagler, who never lost a rematch, pointed out that once you've defeated a fighter before, it not only gives you confidence, but the knowledge of how to do it. The other guy isn't going to be able to do much different. Hagler added that if Tommy tries to bang Leonard out right away, he's making a big mistake. He was winning their first fight until he got stopped, and this one is only 12 rounds. Marvelous Marvin seemed to be enjoying retirement. He had already completed shooting his first movie. "My hardest job is staying out the boxing game," he said. "I've got nothing left to prove." "But you never say never," said Hagler. "Who knows? If these guys beat each other up bad enough, it might make it easy for me to think about returning." Aram and the imaginative Caesar's Palace publicity crew had distributed silver plastic army helmet liners advertising the war. Even Duran was wearing one of the helmets. When Cholo, a.k.a. Duran, strolled through the casino wearing it later that day, he was said to look like one of General Noriega's enforcers. The arrival of the fight mob for Leonard Hearns too coincided with a convention of 18,000 Southern Baptists in Las Vegas that week. On the strip just outside Caesars, flag-waving Baptists were trying to pass out Jesus Loves You literature to drug dealers from Detroit, while a few feet away, a rather jaundiced-looking Vegas wino offered pamphlets advertising a local escort service. A taxi driver taking a boxing writer to Toko's gym over the weekend reported that his cab company had just ferried 2 carloads of Baptists out to the ranch on the outskirts of town. The weekend before the Leonard Hearns rematch, the Boston Herald scribe Michael G. surveyed several local sports books for a story on the gambling aspects of the fight, and discovered that Leonard was a 7-5 favourite in some betting parlours, while others gave the slight edge to Hearns. Ray was 2-1 to win by either knockout or decision, Tommy 3-1 by knockout, 5-1 by decision. G discovered more than 32 betting propositions on offer, including a 15-1 price on Hearns for a first-round knockout, 10-1 on a Leonard first-round knockout. Interestingly, the story, which ran across 3 columns, did not address the possibility of a draw. G was, however, standing in the sports book at Caesars the next day when he came upon what he described as 2 young men just off the plane from Copenhagen, staring intently at a large television set as a replay of the Leonard-Hagler fight played on the screen. "Is there still time to get a bet on the fight?" asked one of the Danes. G briefly considered offering a man-to-man wager before informing the 2 visitors that the fight they were watching had been over a couple of years.